Welcome to Proof of PR, your passport to the world of public relations for Bitcoin and Web3. I'm your host, Kelley Weaver, CEO of Melrose PR, the leading provider of communications and PR strategy in our unique industry. Get ready for an inside look into the future of finance, technology, and entrepreneurship from those driving innovation in the space. Join us as we learn how they generate headlines, cut through the noise, and grow their brand awareness through media placements, press mentions, and thought leadership. These are the stories behind their success. This is Proof of PR. Today, I am joined by Joe Nakamoto, who is a Bitcoin journalist, filmmaker, and MC. By day, he writes, reports, and makes on-the-ground Bitcoin documentaries for CoinTelegraph. By night, he finds ways to introduce people to Bitcoin for his YouTube channel and social media profiles. He's based in Portugal, and he's especially passionate and optimistic about Bitcoin adoption in Africa. Welcome, Joe.
Hello, Kelley. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great, and it's great to see you again. We first met at the Pacific Bitcoin last year, and I was instantly struck by your charisma and love of Bitcoin. So I'm excited to dive into this.
Wow, in that order as well. I was hoping the love of Bitcoin might come first, but
I think it's your beautiful hair. You're very
thanks. This is hours and hours in the sea. Loads of salt water is the key to healthy hair. My hairdresser keeps telling me off about. But anyway, yeah, sorry. What are you going to say?
We digress. Yeah. So tell us, when did you start reporting in the crypto and Bitcoin space? And what's your beat at CoinTelegraph?
For this, we kind of have to go back to, I used to work for a Bloomberg subsidiary called Oxford Business Group. And I bounced around a lot of emerging markets in the world. So it's sort of like, it wasn't quite journalism, but it was more like research-based reporting. We'd put together these annual reports every year on sort of smaller economies so that investors can have a better insight of what's going on there. And I was working in the Ivory Coast, and I was reporting, and this is when my sort of driver in the Ivory Coast orange pilled me. But before that, I had a little bit of Bitcoin. I was interested, I was sort of fringe interested. And then my driver, Guillaume, was talking to me about how he received money from his son in Paris. And I was like, Guillaume, how are you doing this? You know, Western Union is the way that everyone does this here. And he's like, oh, it's avec le Bitcoin. And I was like, let me stop you right there. Let me tell you how it's a Ponzi scheme. Like, obviously, people are making money off it. I'm making like a little bit of money off it, but it's not actually a revolution. And he talked me through it and said that, you know, this is the way that he receives money from his son. And eventually the cogs started churning to some extent, and I started to realize that there's more to this Bitcoin thing than meets the eye. It's not just a speculative tool that we've all, we see it perceived as in mainstream media. And the reason I'm explaining that is because I went to my editor at Oxford Business Group and said, you know, this Bitcoin thing has legs in Africa. Remittance in particular seems to be on the up because of Bitcoin and also other crypto tokens as well, but mostly Bitcoin. So I started to do some research about it and eventually published like my first article about that 3 or 4 months later. But it was in the purview, or it was under the sort of narrative structure that they like, which is Bitcoin remittances are up 30% in Africa. This is how it's being used. However, crypto is also on the rise. Bitcoin has energy issues. You should use Chia token, because it was like unbiased journalism. So I did that for another couple of years. And then in 2020, the start of the pandemic, I was in Tunisia, and all the jobs just dried up overnight because of this weird corona thing that no one knew much about. And I got sent home, and that's when I properly sort of had the time and finally the inclination to take Bitcoin a bit more seriously. So I've technically been writing about the Bitcoin and crypto world since early 2019, but I wrote crap for the crypto world until this morning when I finally realized what Bitcoin is, and now it all makes sense. But yeah, it's a tricky world to write about because it's not tribal, but it's just so, indentured. Like there's these communities that are so structured. And so for me personally, to the second part of your question, I now write primarily about Bitcoin because it's the one that I know the most about. It's also the one that I have the most sort of belief and the most conviction in. And it's the one where I think I can make the sort of biggest contribution to human development and human progress, if I'm going to put my megalomaniac hat on for the sake of this conversation, because ultimately, like, Bitcoiners and Bitcoin people have this weird belief that we genuinely can change the world and we can replace this fiat system. And that's also something that I really buy into, and I think is the most amazing thing. And I want to contribute to that in a meaningful way. And with the skills that I have, which is, journalism, content creation, and being charismatic and talking about Bitcoin, just to steal your words there.
Fantastic. Are you one of the only sort of Bitcoin focused reporters at CoinTelegraph, or are there others?
Publicly, yes. But behind closed doors, if you come to some of the CoinTelegraph networking parties, you can sort of get a sense of where people are on the crypto spectrum. And there are definitely a lot of sort of behind the scenes maxis, but it might not be worth them showing their cards. And there's also a lot of people that really understand that Bitcoin is this 0 to 1 moment, but they don't necessarily want to stop writing about Ethereum or stop writing about other parts of the decentralized world. Decentralized world. Whereas, I made it quite clear early on that I really wanted to write about Bitcoin and only write about Bitcoin, and in some ways, like, make Bitcoin my beat. And I think in some ways it's played in my favor. In some ways, maybe it would be better to be like crypto agnostic. But the other thing that really worried me about the crypto space, and I learned this while working at DAP Radar, because CoinTelegraph wasn't my first sort of job in the crypto industry. I actually worked for DAP Radar for a few months. And DAP Radar, are you familiar with it, by the way? Do you work with them, or are they on your radar?
Not really, no.
They do DeFi protocol analysis. They do sort of NFT reports. They do industry analysis reports sort of on a monthly and a quarterly basis. And then they pitch PR companies, journalism companies to write about them. And they have their own token as well. And to some extent, they were like a reputable company in the crypto industry. And I was doing editorial work and sponsored editorial work for them. And I remember having a conversation with one of my colleagues one day. I came into work on Slack remotely, but still came into work. And he said, "Oh, have you finished that report on whichever metaverse token it was?" And I was like, "Nah, should get around to it tomorrow. Is there any urgency?" He was like, "Oh no, I just thought they would have rug pulled already." And that was when I was like, "Ugh, like, we're actively contributing to these crap projects that we know aren't going anywhere, but are just there for founders and people to rug pull and walk away with the funds." And that was when I was like, okay, if I can't verify all 20,000 of these crypto projects, and I'm very, very much sure and have conviction about Bitcoin, then why even bother wasting my time evaluating whether or not these crypto projects are genuine, legitimate things? And that includes Ethereum, by the way. Like, even the way in which, like, I spent all of 2020 trying to work out whether Ethereum is genuinely a shitcoin or not, and I couldn't establish if it genuinely is. So I was like, well, what's the point? Bitcoin definitely isn't. Just focus my energies on that. I don't have the level of understanding that some of the bigger speakers in the crypto industry do, but I know that Bitcoin is the real revolution here. So I want to dedicate my time and efforts to that one. Especially when you look at the way in which like Ethereum was conceived in 10 sweaty dudes sharing a flat in Switzerland and getting their meals delivered, and then being like, how much of the pre-mine should we give to each other? And I don't know, it just doesn't seem like that is the way in which the new world internet computer would be conceived, especially when you look at sort of Satoshi's origins. I guess I get sort of wrapped up in the narrative of it all, but yeah, that's kind of why I'm dedicating my time to Bitcoin anyway. And as for the colleagues, yeah, I think I'm the only one that's put his name as like Joe Nakamoto on Twitter. Although one of the guys is called No Shitcoins, but he is quite crypto agnostic. His Twitter handle is No Shitcoins.
This tribalistic nature of the industry, I feel like, has become more apparent in recent years. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, massively. Even within the Bitcoin space itself. I mean, I put a wizard's hat there just to troll some people because of all the, the ordinal stuff, which really came to a head at the Miami conference this year. When outsiders look at crypto, I guess there's a lot of confusion, but they still see there's certain camps and certain people that don't talk to each other. But then within the world of, say, Ethereum, there are people that don't talk to each other, and there's people within the world of Bitcoin who, are at each other's throats on Twitter and sometimes to an extent in real life. So it's very tribalistic, very factionalized, and that's wonderful because human nature is just naturally a bit combative sometimes. And isn't it cool to see that Bitcoin is this gigantic, broad church of different beliefs? People that think that ordinals are the best things in sliced bread, and people that think that ordinals are. I don't know if you saw Giacomo Zucco's speech at Bitcoin Prague this year. Where he was not allowed to give that speech in Prague because he said ordinals are swear word. And so Bitcoin Man were like, don't come to our talk and do that. But then he did it in Prague anyway. So you've got these obvious fights going on within the Bitcoin industry. But it just shows how far the industry has come, how far the Bitcoin economy has come. And now you have the Bitcoin Maxima priests, as I like to call them, the Bitcoin toxic maximalists. You've got the Bitcoin Amish. you've got like the Bitcoin vegans, you've got the Bitcoin progressives, you've got like the Bitcoin conservatives. Now you've got Bitcoin presidential candidates. So that there really is a Bitcoin for everyone. And that's a really cool thing. And naturally, these groups are going to get a bit tribal between each other and have a bit of Twitter engagement every now and then. Because also the thing to understand about Bitcoin is that a lot of the activity takes place on Twitter, and Twitter naturally favors all the rage engagement. So like Nostr, for example, completely different protocol, which is decentralized to some extent. All the engagement is really positive, but there's no algorithm. Whereas Twitter, the algo loves rage, loves shock, loves emotion. So I think that also is playing a big role in it.
That's a really good point that I hadn't really considered about how Twitter is driving the narrative here. And also I love your perspective on all of this in terms of how it's healthy and meaningful and shows how far we've come. So I love that. And then we have Joe.
Where are you? Which one do you fit into?
I don't
Kelley?
know.
Is there a Bitcoin PR
like
account?
that. I was just going to say that I like all your labels. We have you to create all the labels. I'm not sure.
I will draw it, but then the thing is that in labeling it, they will hate you. They'll be like, "I'm not this person. I'm this person," and you'll sort of add fuel to the fire.
My concern overall is that it makes it more difficult for new people to come in when they fear saying the wrong thing. So that's sort of my resistance to all the tribalism, I suppose.
No, for sure. I mean, I was speaking to a gay guy last week because I just finished the Bitcoin summer school in Lugano, and I was trying to sort of put him forward to be to help out at conferences and to be, because I don't think there's been like an openly gay MC on stage at Bitcoin conferences before. And I was like, I want, this guy to really show that, Bitcoin is for everyone. And therefore, there's I hope this doesn't sound like wrong or anti-woke saying it, but he's like a very openly gay person. Like you speak to him in the first couple of seconds, you're like, yeah, he's gay, and having someone like that on stage at a Bitcoin conference would inevitably, bring that community more into the Bitcoin space. There are obviously lots of gay and queer and LGBTQ plus Bitcoiners, but having, more of those voices on stage helps other people to bring them in, because ultimately you join those communities that you see parts of yourself in as well, right? And so if you can elevate some of those voices, perhaps it's positive discrimination, I don't know, maybe I'm being woke in doing this, I don't know, but it feels natural for me to want to try to broaden the Bitcoin sort of community even more, because ultimately the protocol couldn't care less whether you are white, gay, black, brown, whatever. It's just a bit of code and some ego, but the ego bit, maybe it would benefit from a bit more variation, maybe some more women in Bitcoin, maybe some more older people in Bitcoin. I don't know. I
guess I'm a Bitcoin working mom.
Bitcoin working mom. So there you go. There's definitely a Bitcoin mums group. Surely there's voice and room for a Bitcoin working mums group. That could be a podcast.
And I was very much into Bitcoin before all three of my children existed on this planet. So I remember them by their births by the price of Bitcoin at the time. Just kidding.
No way. And block height as well?
What's that?
The block height as well?
Not the block height. Okay. I'd have to go back and look.
Yeah. No, definitely do. I think that we're going to see more and more things remembered by the block height rather than the date. Kids' birthday is obviously a really crucial one, and it's more accurate, right? Because do you have sons and daughters?
Yes, I have 2 girls and 1 boy. Yeah.
Oh wow. Okay, that's busy. So,
your
mum, your daughters.
Bitcoiners.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, this is how we get adoption, right? Through children. But yeah, they could ask you like, Mum, like how rather than what day was I born or what time was I born? It's like, Mum, what's my block height? I can see these conversations taking place in some weird, Bitcoiny future.
Oh goodness, I love that. So you do all this online educating about Bitcoin, and I love your videos that you post on Twitter. How has that come to be, and is that part of what you do for CoinTelegraph, or is that really just for fun?
Yeah, unfortunately, it's not what I do for CoinTelegraph, i.e. I'm not paid for it. And yes, I'm primarily doing it for fun, to push myself, to discover, to explore. I don't know, it's just a sort of a comfort zone thing. I mean, the reason why it all started, if I'm assuming that no one knows who I am in your audience because no one knows who I am in the real life. And basically, I was at the World Economic Forum in 2021, and I was doing like crypto reporting there, as crypto to some extent has taken over the WEF. And while we were there, we thought, why don't we ask people if they recognize what the Bitcoin B is on my jumper, and do like some street interviews, like like you'll see them a lot on TikTok and YouTube Shorts and that sort of thing. And as we were doing this, I was like, this is actually a really funny way of getting a sense of adoption in a place, and also a sense of, what the sentiment towards Bitcoin is in an area, place, event, whatever it may be. And when we finished doing it, like we created the content, everything, and maybe I should link the video or something, but in the first couple of seconds, someone mistakes the Bitcoin B for the Bugatti logo. And then a few minutes later, someone mistakes the Bitcoin B for the Bentley logo. So this is the World Economic Forum, This is very different. It's Davos. It's 2,000 meters up a mountain, the most exclusive event in the world. And people are confusing Bitcoin for Bugatti. So I don't know what that says about financial privilege. It is what it is. And then anyway, we finished doing that. And I thought the concept was really cool. And I tried to do it more and more in places around the world. But CoinTelegraph were like, we don't really want to use this content. And I said, well, I think it's a really interesting way of showing, when I do documentaries around the world, it's just a way of showing like what the common man thinks about the Bitcoin stuff. So like in El Salvador, I did it, done it in Gibraltar, I did it in Biarritz, did it in Senegal, did it in LA. At the Pacific Bitcoin, and CoinTelegraph were like, well, we don't really want to use it other than like a 30-second segment within a documentary. And for me, it's like sometimes 7 or 8 hours standing in a street trying to get people to engage with me and trying to eventually, ask them about Bitcoin. So I thought, well, what better way to do this than just to give out some free Bitcoin for their time to answer these questions. And then also you show them how Lightning works and you get them to use a wallet. So you've also onboarded someone into the Bitcoin network. So I was, filming all this content. I was like, well, I can repurpose this as, street interviews just about Bitcoin adoption around the world. And so I started doing that. And that's why it all goes onto my own channel. Whereas the CoinTelegraph stuff is like 30-second segments that are used after all this work that goes into these documentaries. In a way, like it's useful, certainly, for the CoinTelegraph work that I do. But ultimately, I'm also just trying to have fun. And a lot of people in the Bitcoin space take a lot from it. And the classic thing is we are so early, because a lot of people still don't recognize the Bitcoin B, which is just wild. A lot of people have never uttered the word Bitcoin. So you'll say, like, there's one video I did in St. Lucia where, and this was not CoinTelegraph at all, this was just, I wanted to do it for fun. So me and my girlfriend she sometimes enjoys it with me. Sometimes she's like, here we go again, Joe. Like, my afternoon gone chasing you around with a camera while you try to, talk to people. And this one lady, I wanted to prompt anyway, because, it's called Bitcoin, right? And she was like, Bitcoin? Like, what's Bitcoin? Who's the Bitcoin? And I was like, no, I'm not calling you a bitch. I'm not calling you a bitch. I'm so sorry. It's Bitcoin, hard T. And you'd be surprised how often this happens, which again, just shows how early we are and how much more educating and how much more we've got to do to meet people where they are. A lot of people just go to Twitter for Bitcoin stuff because that's where the Bitcoin people and crypto people hang out. And that's also where PR is effective. But, we need to do more on TikTok, Instagram, Nostr, Threads, I guess, which I'm still not on, but, hopefully soon, to meet people where they are and to understand and to find out ways to reach a mainstream audience about this weird Bitcoin stuff that, let's be honest, is still pretty niche, at least to most people. I think in America and certainly in LA, the adoption is much better. Like in LA, it was, very easy to give away free Bitcoin. But in France, it was impossible. Like the French had really low levels of adoption. Yeah.
And I saw some of your content from El Salvador, which I thought that was really interesting because there's been a lot of press around the adoption there. But you had, sort of an experience that maybe painted a better picture of the actual adoption. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, no, I just try to be honest and transparent wherever I go, which is actually really hard as a journalist. Who knew, right? But in El Salvador, like the challenge was, can I live on Bitcoin for 2 weeks in Bitcoin country, i.e. El Salvador? So do not touch fiat rails at any point. And, there can be shortcuts here and there. Like if someone gives you something for free, then it's fine, of course. But ultimately try to live off Bitcoin. And I failed on day 5. And I just documented every time that I spent Bitcoin, and I created this big tweet thread. And the tweet thread itself went semi-viral within the crypto community. Like Vitalik Buterin quote tweeted it. Like Stacy and Max were like interested in it. And a few other sort of big crypto accounts picked it up. Because, for example, I was the first person to pay in Bitcoin at my hotel, which was in El Zonte. And the way in which you perceive or imagine El Zonte is like everyone there is orange pilled, walking around talking about the end of fiat currencies and just, surfing and avoiding seed oils all day. When in reality, it's like a very impoverished town that 3 years ago started to learn about Bitcoin. And now you can live on Bitcoin very easily in El Zonte, but there's still, not everyone is always going to adopt, this new technology. It's a bit like credit cards. Like imagine where you are, there are certain people or certain merchants that don't accept credit cards and are still sticking with cash. And that's absolutely fine, But in the same with El Zonte, there's still a couple of places that don't accept Bitcoin or accept it for a bit and now stopped. And that's just, Bitcoin Beach. Whereas if you look at El Salvador, the country, you can live very comfortably by just visiting the chains. So if you want to go to Starbucks, your McDonald's, and your Burger King or whatever, they're all lightning friendly. But then your mum and pop stores, they're the ones that you would love to see them using Bitcoin. And they're not. It's not necessarily Bitcoin's fault. It's almost a question of Bitcoin education's fault and also of Chivo's fault, because Chivo is awful. It was just riddled with errors since it started. So Chivo is the government-sponsored Bitcoin wallet that was rolled out to everyone, and they could, every El Salvadorian essentially got this airdrop of $30 if they downloaded the Chivo wallet when Bitcoin was finally sort of written into law. But it was base chain first, so not Lightning. It was USD first, not Bitcoin. And it's like the UX on it is really clunky and slow. So a lot of the time people just thought that Chivo was Bitcoin, and therefore because the experience with Chivo was bad, they thought that Bitcoin was bad, and therefore they didn't want to use Bitcoin. So I finished up these 2 weeks and I'd learned so much, and I realized that I was actually educating people more in El Salvador about Bitcoin than they were educating me. And I was sort of learning about what their difficulties were. But then it's because I realized, hang on, I've been obsessed with this Bitcoin thing for like 5 years now. These guys were told to use Bitcoin 6 months ago. Of course, they're not going to be, up to speed with it. And that's also like a reality check for all of us guys that are, passionate about Bitcoin. I mean, Obi Nwozu, the founder of Fedimint and the former founder of CoinFloor, he, for me, explained the situation the best. He basically said, in El Salvador, the president said, tomorrow we're going to adopt Chinese. I want everyone to start speaking Chinese, and, we're going to get Chinese mass adoption in El Salvador. And 6 months later, there are a couple of people who are fluent in Chinese because they're just really bright people and they see that Chinese is the future. Most people can say konnichiwa and, maybe order a meal in a restaurant. And then there's a huge amount, 20 or 30% who just can't get Chinese in any shape or form, don't see the point of speaking Chinese. And I'm like, why are we even doing this in the first place? So, maybe if you visit in 3 or 4 years' time, we'll see a lot more of an impact. But just adopting Bitcoin for merchant purposes is very different to adopting Bitcoin and putting El Salvador on the world map, making tourism go, wild, and all the business stuff that's sort of tertiary to the Bitcoin merchant adoption there. And that's, I guess, a whole different conversation. But for me personally, living off Bitcoin for 2 weeks, I struggled. Whereas I just came back from Lugano, where I lived very easily on Bitcoin for 2 weeks.
I'm excited to see you go back and how that evolves with time.
I've heard stories that it's got worse. Apparently it was really good like the first couple of months after the law, and then I was there sort of 9 months after the law was in effect, and now we're coming up to 2 years. Will it be 2 years in August? So yeah, I guess the price plays a part as well. The price, education, and also just people spending their Bitcoin, because a lot of people, like the hodl culture, as I'm sure you're aware, is massive in Bitcoin, especially in the West and especially in the US, because it's just a bit trickier to spend your Bitcoin, right? You've got to declare it as taxes and that sort of thing. The fact that people know that it's going to go up in value, they don't spend it, because why would you if you still have fiat to spend? You'd want to spend the less worthwhile thing. I spend Bitcoin the whole time, but it's because I'm paid in Bitcoin and have been for a few years now. And I just don't see the point in fiat. So why not vote with your feet and use the better money?
How is that with the volatility being paid in Bitcoin?
So the best part about all this is that my salary is in dollars, rather than pounds, rather than euros, anything else, because the dollar still is like the dominant fiat currency. And then I'm paid twice a month, which is also really good for volatility. So it all seems to come out in the wash. Like when I started to be paid in Bitcoin, the price of Bitcoin was 30,000-ish. And then it went up to 60,000-ish. And then it went down to 15,000-ish. So each month, it really varies. But ultimately, all I'm focused on is having more Satoshis at the end of the month than I started the month with. And that is also a tremendous lesson in saving and in discipline and in, financial planning and that sort of stuff. And I feel like a lot of people, particularly millennials and Gen Zs, have sort of forgotten the value of saving. And ultimately, Bitcoin isn't an investment, it's saving. And the saving is like a betting on a better future for yourself, for your family, for your friends, for humanity. So it's a great big sort of 2 thumbs up to optimism and, the fact that we can maybe change this planet. Because people that are just spending all their salaries, I mean, not the people that are forced to, because, you're in a horrible financial situation. But if you can save, then why aren't you? Because if you're just spending your whole salary, then clearly you're just saying that I just want to live for the moment for the rest of my life, which is kind of stupid because you're going to be on this planet for 80 to 100 years, right? So surely you'd want to, create a better future for yourself and for maybe your family one day. I don't want to like judge people on a podcast, but I think that, the Bitcoin stuff also teaches you to save and how valuable and worthwhile it is to save. I mean, you're probably stacking sats for your kids, right? Isn't that a wonderful thing for the future?
Yeah. Your dollar cost averaging through your paycheck. What Lightning wallets do you use when you do these 2-week long experiments? Like, what tools are you using?
All sorts. So it really varies week to week, and it's funny looking back at old documentaries because, like last year, I used Blue Wallet a lot, which was a Lightning-enabled wallet, and then they sunset the Lightning wallet, so you had to connect it to your Lightning node, which I still don't run because I'm an idiot. So I've stopped using Blue Wallet, but there's videos of me using Blue Wallet a year ago, and so don't use that anymore, guys, if anyone's listening. But now I use a combination of Phoenix Wallet, which is effectively a Lightning node in your pocket, and it's really easy to use, and you just write down the 12-word seed phrase. So if Phoenix Wallet, if the CIA attacks Phoenix Wallet, or I don't know, some bad stuff happens to the team at Phoenix, then you're still going to have your Bitcoin. You're still going to be able to, you still got custody of it. If you're looking for custodial solutions, then I like Coin Corner because they have really cool UX. They have this great big lightning bolt which flashes up on the screen, which is great for content creation, and that's ultimately what I'm about. And then, like for Zaps and things on Nostr, a lot of people swear by Wallet of Satoshi. I've done partnerships with Wallet of Satoshi in the past. I think they actually sponsored my LA Pacific Bitcoin video, so they just paid for the video editor fee, so that I could, not lose money on all these videos because I tend to just lose money on them. And then what else? Oh, and I've recently started playing around with Bitcoin Beach Wallet, which is recently rebranded to Blink. And that's a really good way of getting money from Bitcoin base chain to Lightning. So you can easily send it to the wallet as base chain, and it just mingles it straight away as Lightning. It's custodial, so obviously it's not your keys, not your coins. But, there are different tools for different uses. And ultimately, Lightning, it should be said, is still experimental technology. And you shouldn't be putting tens of thousands of dollars on a Lightning wallet. Like the max for me that I feel comfortable with is like 300 quid. But that's because I would go out the house with $300 in my pocket and I wouldn't be like shaking, and nervous. And that's kind of the way I picture Lightning still. It's like the cash in your pocket is what you'd feel comfortable with in a Lightning wallet. It's not Bitcoin base chain. It's not the proper self-custodied, node, sort of Bitcoin that you can verify on the blockchain. It's a fast, fun payment technology, which is still in its infancy. It's only really been running properly since 2019, although it was, penciled in 2016 with a white paper. So what do you have a go-to, or do you like to use one wallet over another?
For Moon is what I use on my phone.
Yeah, I used to use them until they rug pulled us all during the recent fee spike. Like their fees went through the roof during the ordinals craze because they weren't actually doing Lightning; they were doing subatomic swaps. And so I used to recommend them a lot, and now I'm like, nah, don't use that because if things run up, then we're in trouble.
I want to talk about the relationship between journalism and PR. And you mentioned earlier that Twitter is where PR really works effectively. Can you expand on that? And also, what's your perception of this relationship and how does it work for you?
In crypto, I think LinkedIn is probably the better playground for general PR. I didn't work in PR, but I did a couple of years working like selling hotels in the Alps, and we did a lot of work. I was like business development. So inevitably you're doing a lot of work with like PR agencies. And that was when a lot of my sort of chatter was on LinkedIn. But in the crypto world, I think a lot of it is on Twitter, just because that's the town hall or the main public square where the town crier, i.e. Elon, comes out and rings his bell and says, talk about this for a while, guys. But yeah, for me personally, Twitter works best. That's because I'm probably most active on Twitter.
PR people are DMing you pitches on Twitter or interacting with you on Twitter. Give me tactical sort of examples of how
can I pin you down,
PR
Joe?
is being effective. Yeah.
I mean, social media is obviously not the best, but if we're talking about the social media, then I'd say interacting on Twitter is more meaningful than interacting, say, on LinkedIn. LinkedIn, I still see as a bit disingenuous, a bit like, oh, congratulations, oh, well done on your raise, this sort of thing. Whereas Twitter is more like the bar where you can hang out after the conference and actually be human together and be like, yeah, we're on the same page here. Like, you want this thing, I want that thing, let's talk about it. And you can also like share in the fact that you're both navigating this weird crypto world in which we all know Bitcoin's going to win, but that all this crypto stuff is still there. I mean, you guys call Proof of PR the Bitcoin and Web3 podcast. So you guys even make that distinction with your intro. Well,
it's interesting because we represent clients across the industry. So we have crypto clients, we have clients that service, we have Bitcoin only clients. We have a spectrum of different clients within the industry. So, we can't be specific yet.
Okay. Yeah. I thought that was that was an active thing where you're like, there is Bitcoin and there is everything else. But in reality, it's just because you have like Swan as one of your clients, I'm guessing, and Web3 clients as well under the same umbrella of crypto.
Right. Well, because so you are an example of a reporter that works specifically on Bitcoin as your beat. Mm-hmm. But, a lot of the reporters that we work with cover all facets of the industry. And a lot of the reporters that we work with, we work a lot with the crypto trade publications, obviously, like CoinTelegraph and CoinDesk and others. But we also work with a lot of mainstream news outlets that have, full-time crypto staff reporters, and they cover Bitcoin and everything else. And our clients, some of our clients are providing infrastructure for the industry that's not just Bitcoin specific.
No, I think I'm definitely, let's be honest, like most crypto reporters are covering crypto. I think I can name like 2 other reporters that are only like Bitcoin focused, like probably George at CoinDesk. I mean, everyone at Bitcoin Magazine, right? But that's very different. I don't really know who the other sort of Bitcoin only reporters are.
There's only a handful for sure that are, because it's a beat. It's a part of the industry right now. And, but there's so much happening, and so much infrastructure being built. So,
although like on that note, like like CoinTelegraph, for example, is pivoting more into AI content, more into quantum computing content, more into longevity, like all these sort of tangential things that are still sort of interesting to the crypto crowd. So within that sort of circle, I'm trying to get Bitcoin stuff into there as well, because obviously I just want to write about Bitcoin. That's the thing I know best. And that's the thing that I know is going to be here in 10 years time. And I care about my reputation in this space. I don't want to be writing about Ethereum and Dogecoin and everything else when it's just, I just can't do it. I don't want to write, I left writing about the fiat world because I was so jaded by it. And I don't want to get jaded by the crypto world as well, which I just see as sort of opaque and I don't know who's being advantaged. And here we have this perfect, free system where anyone can participate with Bitcoin. So, but within the sort of the new topics that a lot of the crypto world is going to start looking at, I mean, it could be the US elections, right? Obviously that's around the corner. So all the crypto content is going to pivot to that. So again, I can write about whether or not Ron DeSantis says Bitcoin is good for America or not. And obviously RFK Jr. is all about Bitcoin and presidential elections. So I know it might sound a little bit restricting to just be like Bitcoin only. The great thing about Bitcoin is that it can touch so many other facets of this, so many other areas of interest of this industry. I could write Bitcoin stories till 2025, no problem. And there's like so much original content too. But I think I've kind of avoided your question about like where the best way is to connect with PR people. Have I been dodging it?
I don't think intentionally, but I am curious about how you use your relationships with PR professionals to your advantage to be able to help you write stories.
So I probably write about 1 or 2 PR stories a month. So I'm mostly doing on the ground reporting, actual interviews with people. However, like if I look at my author profile, I don't want to lie to you. Because I think I wrote about, for example, Unchained last week, or last month even, had a raise. What else have I written about recently? Oh, I wrote about a Bybit license approval in Cyprus, but that was more because I was told to write about it. That sometimes happens naturally. Oh, and then I wrote about a raise at River. Like these things are obviously, like the raise with River was big. It was like 35 million. I think the raise with Unchained Cat was 60 million. And I have a really good relationship. Yeah, take River as an example. I have a really good relationship with the guys at River, like really like what they're doing. And I've met them a few times at events and things. So I know they're not like a scammy company, which there are unfortunately lots of in the Bitcoin space. So, I think I must have received a PR email for one of their guys. I must have followed it up and then wrote it, knowing that I trust those guys, I trust what they're doing. And I've already written about River a lot in the past, whether it's about their Lightning Node connections or, just other stuff about the company. And I'd seen Alex, the CEO, in person a few times. And then, same with Unchained Cap. Like, they are a well-known...
It's about trust. It's about trust.
Sorry?
Is what I'm hearing. It's about trust. Like you
trust
this company. You're willing to cover their news. Do you ever use it where... Sorry, you were going to say about the Unchained example.
No, I think it's exactly the same thing. Like, I know who Unchained Cap are. I've actually... Well, maybe a couple of years ago now, I used their product and know the guys behind it. And I feel like in the Bitcoin space as well, like, because they are Bitcoiners, there's this implicit level of trust, which sometimes I have to check myself on, because although we are on this same mission together, it doesn't necessarily we're going to agree on everything. And it does mean that you could also take me for a ride. And that's another thing that you have to always be aware of as a journalist, right? That you don't want to put something on the platform which ultimately could be misleading, or it's obviously selling something which shouldn't be, sold, or it's not newsy enough for the reader. And there's a lot of crypto journalism that is basically like PR journalism. I'm sure you've seen plenty of this sort of thing. And it's like, okay, well, ultimately, are we giving the reader a good experience here? Are we informing them, educating them, maybe entertaining them as well? And is, the PR story the best thing for that right now? I think that's I've just scrolled through my, I'm now at January 2023.
What about for thought leadership type stuff? And perhaps you don't source experts as much or quote them in your stories as much, but do you ever use PR people to get you trustworthy folks to quote in your articles? Or since you're doing a lot of on the ground stuff, you're finding your own sources sort of in real time?
I haven't for a long time used PR. I think when I was starting out, I did use PR people to help me get sort of quotes. For example, say the Lightning Network hits 5,000 Bitcoin capacity tomorrow, or 6,000, whatever it is going to hit. And, it's good to write the story, but then it's important for the reader to understand why that is meaningful, because you as a journalist can write that, but it ends up being quite a colored piece that's basically your opinion. And it's much better to bring in an expert on the matter. So at the start of CoinTelegraph, when I wasn't as well connected, I would I'd use PR help. But nowadays I can just DM, if I want to DM the CEO of Corn Corner, I can, and speak to him. If I want to DM Corey, I mean, he probably DMs me more than I DM him. And there are other sort of thought leaders, whether it's, I don't know, Samson, I'm on good terms with him. I can't DM Saylor yet. I'll draw the line there. That would be really nice to do one day. It sounds like a humble brag, doesn't it? I think I can DM Bitcoin CEOs, but it's my job, right? I should be able to do that. I should be able to reach out to them for quotes. And obviously it's beneficial for them because it's technically free coverage, and it's beneficial to the reader because they get a better sense of why it's significant. That said, it's still useful. I mean, I don't know why PR companies do sometimes do this, but they could just do a roundup, like what they expect the upcoming stories to be, and then what CEOs or thought leaders could comment on as of that.
We do that. I guess we don't reach out to you and, oh yes, absolutely. Especially we proactively look at what's news is happening, and then we offer up experts as examples and kind of specify what their talk track could be. And it's a really beautiful thing because a lot of the time, especially when there's breaking news, and I don't know how much you cover breaking news in the industry, the reporters that we work with need quotes and points of view in real time, like in an hour. And so having us to be able to canvas our clients, like, oh, who's willing to speak to this? What's your take? Grabbing that, sourcing that, packaging it up and sending it to the reporter in a 30-minute window is incredibly helpful. And it's oftentimes where we'll see like a TechCrunch article come out about breaking news a couple hours later. And it's like Melrose client A, Melrose client B, Melrose client C, quote, 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 because we're able to kind of deliver it quickly. So I don't know if you have perhaps maybe your workflow is not the same in terms of like capturing the breaking news. But I do think that that's a beautiful sort of thing between PR and journalism where they're working on the story. So they just need it kind of served up on a platter. We understand what they need and we can get it to them sort of efficiently and effectively so that our clients win and they win.
No, that's super useful. I mean, I guess for me, it's more like they're Bitcoin only summaries or like, for example, the halving's around the corner as well. getting commentary on that and why the halving, what does it mean, why is it meaningful, etc. Would be like a useful sort of thing, just have it in the bank. And then obviously whenever I do interviews with people at conferences or when I meet them, I'll share that with the news team, being like, take any of this quote and reuse it elsewhere, and it'll just have generic stuff on like Bitcoin and the environment, Bitcoin and AI, Bitcoin and I don't know, how to organize society.
How do you see the role of journalism sort of evolving in our industry over the next few years?
Hopefully we'll have fewer Mario Nafal people and we'll have more, legit journalists. I really see have you noticed the rise of citizen journalism recently, but like bad citizen journalism? People like Mario Nafal and other people that are like, I'm at the war in Ukraine and this is what I'm seeing. And you're like, I don't know if I can trust that. And that looks really dodgy to me. And I don't know. And the sort of social media based journalism seems to really be on the rise.
Twitter spaces and things, you mean?
Yeah. It just seems contrived, and it seems so easy to whip up emotion when there wasn't really much of a story. I mean, we saw it recently with the fake or the coup that wasn't a coup that basically gripped Twitter for all of a weekend. In Russia, there was sort of like the military raid that went wrong, and Twitter was going absolutely crazy for it, while the mainstream media was a bit like nonplussed. And that was, for me, made clear that, okay, while the mainstream media or legacy media is to some extent like discarded and disliked by the Twitterati and by the crypto media sources, on this one, they were a bit, they summed up the situation a bit better, whereas Twitter was going absolutely wild for it. And anything that was related to Russia during that period, that the engagement went through the roof, which is a shame, right? Because I think that a lot of people a lot of journalists still do use Twitter as like one of the best places to source stories and also to reach out to people. And yeah, it is a really like effective tool. But where's it going in 5-10 years? I mean, with the rise of AI as well, there's going to be so much more sort of fact checking and having to double check that what you're seeing is not a fake piece. Like we're seeing so many, like we had deep fakes, and now we're going to have AI deep fakes. And how are we going to be able to decipher that sort of thing? And will it even be humans writing it? Like every journalist has used ChatGPT in the past 6 months. If they haven't, sorry, but they're an idiot. Come on, like it makes all of our lives so much easier. Don't write the thing with ChatGPT, because I spend so much time speaking to ChatGPT that I can tell if you've written something with ChatGPT or not. And I've actually called out people who are writing articles with ChatGPT being like, this is crap because it's written by an AI. But if you spend enough time reading it, you can identify its voice. Just like if I read your emails for 6 months, I would be able to identify Kelley's voice. I can also, identify ChatGPT's voice. And I'm not the only person to be able to do this. I don't have like some ChatGPT sixth sense. But even like a friend was commenting on loads of Twitter posts last week. And I was like, mate, it looks like ChatGPT is writing your tweets for you. Are you experimenting? I was trying to give him a way out. And he was like, might be. How do you know? I was like, because it's just such an obvious voice. It's inhuman. I know that people think that it's the most amazing thing, but it's still not quite there. But, technology is exponential. And it is getting better every day. Like even like ChatGPT 4 was way better than ChatGPT 3. So what does that mean for journalism in 5 years? Will it just be, okay, Bitcoin hits 40K, ChatGPT write the article with the voice of Joe Nakamoto, and it will publish it, and it will get the nice image and put it all on the page together? What does that mean for journalists? What can we focus our times and our energies on in such an environment? I don't really know. Should I be worried, Kelley?
It's interesting for me to hear that you're using it so often and using it for productivity, I would imagine. Like how are you using it so often?
For example, I asked it like, what were the last like 3 investments that Google Cloud made? And then you always have to verify it because it's not that accurate sometimes. Like how many of Google Cloud's investments were into crypto products? I wanted to get a sense of like how invested it is in the crypto space. And then I asked it when I eventually wrote the piece, the usual thing that I do is paste it in there and get it to proofread. And then once it's proofread, but I don't get it to actually accept the suggestions. I get it to point out where the mistakes were made. And then I ask like questions about the article I just wrote. Like, for example, would a 13-year-old understand the point of this article? And then is Joe for or against Google Cloud or for or against Lightning? So it's like you've got an audience.
To be objective.
Well,
to make sure that you're being objective.
Well, to an extent, but you've got to bear in mind that it's also ChatGPT answering. So it's a super useful tool. Just like a knife is a super useful tool for cutting things, but it's crap at starting a car. ChatGPT is really useful up to a point, but it's a bit like, Grammarly or, word processing. They're super useful, but you still have to use your brain at some point. And then at the end of all that, I'll be like, how good is the SEO in my headline? Please recommend me 5 different headlines. And usually they're all a bit crap, but they'll give you a different way of approaching the problem. And then for the strap line, I'll be like, is this 110 characters? And, does it persuade the reader to want to read on? And then usually you're like, okay, good, we're good to go. So did ChatGPT write the article? I would, in a court of law, I would say, hopefully not. But was it useful to me to help, develop the article and, further those points? I think it really was. And this is why I'm like, why would you not use a tool such as that? It becomes your personal assistant. It would become right. Someone who's in your office with you, you can ask these on the fly questions to. And I sound like I'm paid by ChatGPT right now, don't I? I'm sure there's other large language models that are just as effective. That's just the one that I use on regularly.
No, these are great tips, and I love the visibility into sort of how your process works too. It's fun to listen to.
Yeah, I'm not just trying to be lazy, I promise. Although if it could just write the article, I have asked it a few times, write this article in the style of Joe Hall, and they're just a bit crap. They're just cheesy.
You mean Joe Nakamoto?
Joe Nakamoto, sorry. On CoinTelegraph, I'm Joe Hall, so because I paid for ChatGPT 4 for a while, so it could read more recent stuff. So I point it towards my website and say, study my voice. This is how I write me an article. And it's just not there. And also, this is funny. I did a freelance piece for a client. So I do other freelance work as well. And I wrote a piece for a client and he replied back to me saying, sorry, I can't accept this. It's more than 70% AI. And I was like, what? No, it's not. Like I wrote this by myself. There was like parts that were like definitions that I'd used ChatGPT, then changed a few words here and there. And he was like, no, on the AI checker, it says that they're above 50% and we don't accept above 50%. And so I tried my own sort of AI checkers, which by the way, I recommend you use some of these AI checkers on people's work because you'd be surprised how much it skews towards like 100%. And eventually I got the number down, but I was amazed that, firstly, it skewed so high when I barely used AI on that piece. And secondly, that it is very easy to sort of catch people out that are using AI tools. Bear in mind as well that these checkers do massively skew towards AI over human. They just automatically assume that you're being naughty. Because I've written stuff before that's 100% ChatGPT and changed a few words here and there. And I've written stuff which is 0% ChatGPT and even 0%, it says like, 30 or 40%, like your AI might have been used here, which is, I think just the nature of the tool.
Did he ultimately accept it?
He did, yeah. Got paid. We're all okay. But it was again like a wake up call. Like people are ultimately going to value the voice and people are going to value authenticity. So even if you can get an AI to write in your voice, I guess that's an ethical question. Like, should you? If it does seem like, I could have written that, then would you still publish it, or would you feel like, I shouldn't have published that?
Well, Joe, thank you so much for coming on the show today. I've learned a lot. I really appreciate you taking this time. Do you have any closing thoughts or resources that you'd like to share with the listeners?
Just hope people are learning about Bitcoin, really. Study it, then stack some sats and just set it and forget it. Just buy $5 or $10 a week, whatever you're comfortable with, and just forget about it for 5-10 years. And we'll have a drink in a bar somewhere. And you'll be like, thanks, Joe. I remember you saying that in 2023. And now I've got, this great life. And resources, I don't know. If you want to watch my YouTube videos, they're on Joe Nakamoto. I'm trying to do YouTube stuff, but I'm so busy with the CoinTelegraph stuff that I just don't have a lot of time to dedicate towards that. And the YouTube documentaries that I'm making, if you're interested, they're on CoinTelegraph. And the idea is to try to orange pill my mum because she still thinks that I'm a scammer. So they're all like with my mum in mind. So they're much more mainstream, much more approachable. And the idea is that you can share them to your non-crypto friendly friends. So yeah, check them out as well.
Thanks for tuning in to Proof of PR. This episode was brought to you by Melrose PR, the leading provider of communications and PR strategy for Bitcoin and Web3 innovators. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to subscribe, rate, and review us wherever you listen today. To stay up to date on upcoming guests and news, visit proofofpr.com or follow us on Twitter @proofofpr. Until next time, keep learning, innovating, and hodling.